Hey guys, tonight I thought I'd show you how I sync the carbs to get the cable adjustments correct and to get a minimal opening for a fresh startup. So really all I'm talking about here, I'm not talking about, whoops, what side is it? Where are the air screw adjustments, jetting, nothing. Here, the only thing I'm talking about is two mechanical aspects of getting the car back on the bike and getting slide set somewhere to where it might run, okay, and get the cables synced up so they lift the slides at the same time and the same distance. And I think I found a very easy way to do that. I've read things where you drop the slide all the way down, and then then you try to feel by doing like this and try to feel when they move, and I was like, yeah, that's not going to work for me, okay, because even though I got a pretty decent feel, I didn't feel like it'd be as accurate. So I found a very visual way to accomplish that, and I believe a very accurate way. So we've got the carbs off because we're rebuilding the motor anyway, right? Okay, this is the first time back on. And what we need to do first is make sure we have this nut, okay, at the tension that we would have it on the bike, okay? Because as we compress that gasket, we change the height of this, which changes the height of the slide. We can all agree on that. So we need to get this about where we would have it on the bike, okay, and that'll take a little bit of the variable out of the entire picture, okay. The next thing we want to do is and let me give you a little background on my thought process here first. There's a counterbore on each side and around the bore to where the slide can go down and actually shut off, okay? Well, not knowing exactly where that's machined kind of throws in a variable that we don't know. We'd have to go and actually measure all that. Well, what we do know is exactly where the floor of the bore is. It's at the floor of the bore, okay? In other words, if I stick this stick in here and drop the slide on it, I can absolutely guarantee that the bottom of the stick is on the bottom of the bore, okay? And this slide is absolutely on the top of the stick. Makes sense, right? Okay, so we can determine those two dimensions. And that's really all we're concerned about, because that is the opening of the carburetor. I think we can all agree there. So, when I started my bike, I called a couple guys, asked some numbers, and I got some numbers. I set the height for 93 thousandths, or a 33-second drill. Okay, and if you noticed on my video, when I fired it up, I was idling in excess of 3,000 RPM. Okay, so in my wisdom, I started backing the idle down by turning these counterclockwise and actually raised the idle. Okay, that's a different story. But anyway, added to the confusion. But, so anyway, the other day I took these off because now I've got an idle of, like right around 13, 14, 12, 13, 14, whatever. So I pulled these off last night to make a change, okay? And I thought, well, while I got these up, I'm going to measure this opening so that if I ever have the need to redo this again, I'll know about where to put those back. Makes sense, right? So my number that I came up with was 52 thousandths, and I determined that with a number set of drill bits, okay, which happens to be a number 55 drill. Okay, now, not everybody has these, and I know that. So I thought, well, okay, let's use for this a 16th inch drill. Everybody can get one of these. Everybody has one of these, one or the other. You can go to the hardware and get it, whatever. They're cheap. There you go. And we want to use a drill bit because they are typically straight. Okay? They're not going to be bent. They're not going to be burred. They're not going to be anything. They're just going to be nice straight. So let's get a 16th inch drill bit. Okay? And all we're going to do is make sure, again, make sure our nut's tight wherever we would normally put it. We're going to slide the drill under the floor of the bore. There you go, my new term. And I'm going to go back and hit the needle. Okay, and the reason I hit the needle back here is because I want to be as consistent across all three carburetors as I can be. And if I go back and hit the needle on every one, then that just raises my level of consistency because I've done all three of them the exact same way. Okay, so that's all we're going to do. We're just going to go back, touch that needle, and I'm moving in and out. You can see my fingers kind of flexing, and I'm dropping the slide. I'm turning it the right way this time. See how I raise it back up a little bit because I didn't feel good. And I'm going to get a feel for how that is, okay? And, whatever feel you get, see how that moves kind of when I rock it? So to me, that's not good, okay? That means it's still loose in there. But whatever feel you get is good, as long as it's the same on all three, okay? So I'm going to mess around here a little bit more and lower a little bit more until I get that thing to where it's just kind of, to where I like to feel. It's going to drag, it's going to be trapped, it's not going to move. Okay, it's still moving a little bit, okay? And I'm going to try and get that as precisely as I can. Okay, so now it doesn't flop back and forth, so I'm trapped, and it probably won't dump out. No, it can dump out. And it should just extract very easily. It should just pull right out. And there you go. Okay, so now I know that that baby is 62 thousandths above the floor of the bore. Okay, so now all we do is do that to all three carburetors. So just a quick recap. Step one, make sure the nut's tight. Take a 16th inch drill. Set them all for that 16th inch drill. That's it. Now we're going to pause. I'm going to remount this on the bike, and I'll show you my second step. For the next step, you're going to need one of a couple tools, I guess you might call it. One is either a set of popsicle sticks, okay, with the front end kind of whittled down a little bit, all right? And just so you know, hang on a second. Everything's about 4.5 inches long. Okay, so just so you know, so you're gonna need the popsicle sticks, okay, or what I like is I kind of whipped up these, okay, and what it is, it's a same length, 4.5 inches, and I ground a taper on this end, okay, see if you can, there we go, just on the grinder or sander or whatever you want to use. And then I screwed a 1032 nut on there, just so it sticks on there. Okay. Then on the end I ground this notch, and if I could have my assistant's hand to make the camera focus, let's see. There we go. I got hairy knuckles, so we don't want mine. There we go. Whoops. And you can see kind of how I shaped that notch a little bit. Okay. Thank you. And all that's for is to, I'm going to grab this old nasty thing, is to, we're going to stick it under here, and that notch is going to grab the underside of that slide. Okay, and you can probably guess what we're going to do. We're going to balance that in the intake bell, and when that slide moves, we're going to be able to see exactly when these sticks move. Now I like the weighted sticks because they're weighted. Okay, and the other thing I do, I don't know if we can see this here or not, is I take the sticks, and I don't know if we have the same amount of openings here, but I balance them not on one, but between two. Okay, so you know they kind of stick out at a little bit of an angle, which is irrelevant because when that slide moves, we're going to see it. Okay, so whoop you up some of those, and you know either ones you want, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, we've got our carbs remounted. Okay, we got all the cables connected. So the next thing we're going to try to do is sync the cables, obviously. So we know right now that all the slides, all three of them, are a 1/16 inch above the bottom of the bore because we set that with our drill bit. So the next thing we have to make sure is that none of the slides are hanging on the cables. In other words, we want to be sure that the slides are hanging on the idle stops back here, not the cables. So one thing you want to do is just disconnect your pump cable here. And the only reason I do that is so I don't have the weight of the spring skewing my feel for the cable slack. Okay? So just disconnect that. In this, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. What we're going to be doing is adjusting these. Okay, so you may want to get I think it's 7mm, and loosen all these lock nuts here. Okay, I wouldn't worry too much about where these are at right now, but you can get the lock nuts loose so that when it does, you know, come time to make the adjustments, it's just easier to do. You don't have to fiddle with that. Now my assistant is going to show us how to check for the cable clearance, for the cable adjustment. All we need is a little bit of slack. You want to use a very light feel. You know, we don't want to be moving the slides or anything of that nature. So just use a very light feel. Try and get this cable centered perfectly in here so that you're just moving the whole, whatever slack you have, without moving the slides. Now if you don't have any slack, you need to establish some. To do that, we just loosen this, keep going honey, we just loosen this and turn this in until we get slack. And then you can see it right there. She's doing a pretty good job. There we go. Keep pulling. There you go. Okay? And the amount of slack isn't like super critical as long as we have some. It's the same method we would use to check the slack, or the way I do it anyway, in the clutch cable. You know, you pull the cable a little bit, move your lever, and see if you can't just shift the cable slightly. Same thing. Alright, now I'm going to take my little modified sticks that are weighted on the back side there and insert them in slides. So I'm going to go around the other side. Yeah, there's one. And all I do is I just stick it in. I get that, you know, my side up, the notch, hit the slide, go down to pick up the cutout. Then I just try to make sure I lay it in between a couple of those inlet horns there that I described on the other part of the video. So there we have them. They're all three in there. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to tweak the throttle, okay? And you can see that they almost move at exactly the same time, okay? But, just for the... I'm going to really mess them all up. Just because. So I'm going to get in there, whoop, and I'm going to just get them all whacked out. And then we'll redo them. Now, let's see what we got now. Okay, you can see that I gotta be very gentle with the throttle. So we can see number 3 is moving first, and 1 and 2 ain't even going nowhere. Okay? So all we're going to do is I'm just going to back this out until I pick up. Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm going to let that in. I want it to start later, to try and pick up another one. Aha! Now you can see there, number 1 is just starting. Okay? So I'm going to give it a little bit more. I'm going to retard this one, if you wish to call it that. A little bit more, and I'm going to kind of lock that in just lightly. Okay. Now let's see what we got. So I'm trying to get 1 and 3 to be exactly the same. Pretty close. Need a little bit more on this one, I'm thinking. So I screwed it in just to retard it, to get it behind number 1, because number 1 was behind. Let's see what we got now. Okay, you can see that they are just about taking off at the same time. But number 2 is not. So what I'm going to do with number 2 is I've got to bring it up to the same level as 1 and 3. So I'm going to take and back this out. And I give it about 2 flats, and we'll see what it does there. Ah, we're getting closer, okay? And you can see what I'm doing. You just got to mess around a little bit. It doesn't take too long. Boy, that might be really close. Man, that looks so close. And I don't know. I'm going to call that good. Once I watch the video, it'll probably change. But I'm going to lock these in. Okay, I'm going to check it again because that number 2 may... Whoops, my stick moved. Okay, so I'm going to check it again. Doesn't look too bad. We're within a few thousandths. I'm going to lock number 1 down. Okay. And I think, and you can get this just to the best of your visual ability. And while you're doing this, you'll say, man, because I'm barely moving the throttle. Okay? So once you get it to that point, the only next step is just make sure you're locked down, double checked, and then go back and adjust the throttle that my assistant showed you in the beginning, and just, you know, you want some slack, you need slack, but if you created more during this process, then take a little bit of it out. What you don't want is when you turn left and turn right, that you're actually lifting a slide, okay? So I usually, you know, have about I don't know, I'm gonna call it an 1/8 inch of table slack. So an 1/8 inch of movement where my assistant was showing you before, which was about an 1/8 of an inch, you know, so I would just leave it right about like that. Okay, I'd like to drive home just a few points just to sum this all up. One is, you know, the only way this procedure that I propose can work is if these are the same to start with, okay, and we do that by the idle adjust screws, whether you got the ones on the side or whether you have rods that hold the slide up. So after we set our opening with drill bit and we remount the carbs, we have to make sure we do not turn the adjustments, okay, or we have to go back and start all over. Because all we're doing is starting out from a known point. We get them all to move at the same time, and which will provide synchronization between the cables. I think we can see that. So that's just one thing I wanted to drive home. Second one is we have to make sure we have slack. Okay, if you put the carbs back on and you move, the instant you move, you see a stick move, stop. Because that means you have no slack and you don't know how much you don't have. So what you have to do is either through the adjustment up on the grip, okay, or one of the adjustments here, stop these from moving, so that you should be able to rotate that throttle a little bit and then start to see one or all or whatever move. Okay, so again, it's just cable slack. We have to have slack, okay, in each one of those cables as they hang through the slides. Okay, the other thing is when we get to the end where we're all done, and we've adjusted the cable slack up on the grip to get it back to where it's about 1/8 of an inch or whatever. Make sure you got wide open throttle, okay? And you should have. If you've done everything right, it just about has to be. But let's make sure. So get your finger, in there. Use a mirror to look down through here and be sure that you have wide open throttle, okay? And then again, this whole procedure has nothing to do with the adjusting the idle speed after you've established a running engine or the air screw mixtures, okay? So this is just, the basic setup to get the cable synced. It's really all it is. So after you get the engine running, of course, you will need to do your idle speeds, and then you will need to do your air screws, which is another complete issue. So anyway, thanks.